Welcome, everyone, to the Nerd Journey Podcast, episode number 24. We're going to be joining you every week to talk IT career, news, and opinions based on our points of view. I'm your host, John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy, at NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
Hey, John, I'm doing great. I want to make sure our listeners know we are a couple of VMware solution engineers looking to bring them the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers. We hope our career discussions will be relevant across disciplines and remain timeless. If you're enjoying our content, please drop us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you subscribe. And if you want to get in touch with us, tweet or DM at Nerd Journey. Ultimately, we're just two nerds on a journey.
A journey to virtual enlightenment.
So let's take a trip.
Great. How was that opening for you, Nick?
It was good. Tried something a little bit different there. Hopefully it works out.
Yeah, it really came across. I didn't notice that you were doing it until the very last second, and then boom, it was on me.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be a little unpredictable here, John, because it's my turn to ask the questions this week. And so I'm really trying to make you work for it this time.
Oh, that's right. So the topic is the continuation of our last week's topic, my 3-year check-in at VMware. Last week we did kind of my thoughts and a summary of what I had learned over the past 3 years. And this week we were going to do your questions to me, kind of a grill session that we keep jokingly calling it that.
Yeah.
But
you feel good? You feel ready?
I feel ready. I think, we prepped. I think we had all these number 23 jokes ready for last week that we didn't use any of. So this week I did a bunch of research into all the famous people who wore number 24 in various jerseys.
Oh, nice.
So I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, good. Well, that blows away the first few questions I had. We'll just skip those. But see, John, what I had to do was I had to curate and dig through the thousands of listener questions that came in after our last podcast. People wanted to send in questions like, I need to ask John White this question. I want to know about these things. So I'm just gonna go for it. We're just gonna dig in. Does that work for you? I mean, if it takes
absolutely works for me.
If it takes 3 hours, then we're gonna do it for the fans. Does that sound good?
3, 5, 12, it doesn't matter. I am here.
All right, one sitting. Here we go. So, number 1, John, what has made you stay with the company for 3 years now?
Ooh, that is a good one. I would say that when I joined VMware, I considered it as a medium to long-term job. I didn't anticipate, maybe leaving ever, right? You always want the next job to be like the job that you have for life. It's worked out that way for me so far. I really love the technology that VMware has and represents and is, continuously innovating in. I really love the space. I think that, in addition to what we were doing, we have kind of moved into the public cloud space with our partnerships with, the major cloud vendors at this point, Amazon Web Services and Azure. I'm sure in the future, as other, major players evolve, that we'll partner with them as well. But, that's been super exciting. It's always changing. It's new products, it's new solutions, it's new issues that my customers have. I really enjoy the role, I guess, is maybe that second pillar, first love of the technology, second love of the role. I get to help my customers solve their, really important technical problems. That can be technology problems that I can help solve with our product portfolio. And sometimes it's just general consultation. Hey, have you seen this type of problem before? Absolutely, I have. I've dealt with it. My other customers have dealt with it. Here's kind of the 3 different ways that I've seen that problem solved. And, let me know what else, I can do. Do you need me to put you in touch with somebody, else at a different company who can talk to you about how they solve that problem? That type of thing. So to be able to be that person to a number of my customers is really gratifying. The constant change, I talked about change in the product portfolio, but it's just the different types of problems that people run into, and maybe the different, pillars of types of problems. So I've seen technical problems, but I've seen political problems as well. I've had customers ask me, "Hey, so we're having problems like funding things, and can you give me some advice on different strategies and tactics that you've used before in that space of getting IT projects funded?" And to be asked that problem, asked for that consultation is really gratifying, right? Because they're being vulnerable with me, and I have to be straight with them and talk to them in a way that isn't necessarily purely benefiting me, right? So that's a level of trust, achieving that's been really gratifying. And then just, basic pattern recognition. I think I've talked about this before when I was on public forums and the Spiceworks forums mostly, to see different kinds of problems and, different situations, just building up that pattern recognition muscle like that. It's just, super interesting. But again, pattern recognition plus constant change, right? So you can't get trapped into just seeing the patterns that you're used to seeing. You have to get always question, whether you're jumping to conclusions and prejudging the situation. Um, so, that again, like kind of uh, the way that I think about that, that's been, it's just been really enjoyable. So that's been an enjoyable part of 3 years. I would say also just increasing, like maybe the third pillar, increasing my general skill level at all of those things. I like that process of continual improvement of myself, and I'm constantly thinking about, what can I be doing to make myself better at this job? What are the different skill areas in it, and what are the things that I could be better at, and how do I go about getting better at those things? And in our role, there's a whole lot of self study and spinning up by ourselves, and um, I think working with other people on those things, that's been really enjoyable too. To kind of collaborate and um, think of myself as like the lone gunman out there. Hmm, maybe that's not the right analogy. Just kind of to think of myself as the lone ranger, I think is what I was thinking of myself as,
Oh
right?
man.
And then to realize that I'm actually on a team, right? And to be able to leverage all of those people and collaborate, that's been really helpful too.
See, I was thinking of you as more of a Master Yoda kind of figure here. Since starting the John White School of Mentoring, at least that's what I pictured. But hey, your description was pretty good. It sounds like, John, that some of the time you've had your head in the cloud to study up on these other technologies. But one of the things I heard ring true most of all is that you really are trying your best to do the right thing for the customer, even if you're steering them in a direction that makes them not buy something, which I love that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, you have to. You absolutely have to do right by the customer always. And it's your job, at least in my role, I feel like it's my job to maintain the long-term um, best relationship with a customer that I can, especially if it's, steering them away from a purchase that they, even of our products, that they don't need to make, right? But, and I always say this, right? Like, please remember this day that I told you not to spend $20,000 with us, because one day I'm going to come and say, you actually need to spend $80,000 with us. And, you know, you need to remember, like, both of, I'll tell you when I think that you're spending too much or you don't need to spend anything, but I'll tell you when I think you need to spend more. And you can't have credibility in that latter situation if you have never said the first one, right?
Yeah, because not everybody expects you to say that when you're part of a sales organization. So that's good.
Yeah, it's very true.
I like
It's
that.
very, very true. You said something about, me being like that's Master Yoda, but like everybody's in that situation, right? They have more expertise than somebody, and they're, hopefully trying to pass that expertise on, but they also have less expertise than somebody else, and they're trying to gain that expertise. So you always have to like look up to people and realize that they are working on themselves too, right? I'm,
Absolutely.
I'm, I'm only a relative Yoda,
Relative. I love
not
it.
an absolute Yoda.
I see. I see. Okay. That's good. Let me ask this, John. It's been 3 years. Looking back on it, I know that you had mentioned in a previous episode that once you join a company, you try to think about where do I want to be 3, 5 years down the road with this organization. Are you where you thought you might be after 3 years? And are there any goals that maybe you set at the beginning that you achieved, surpassed, or have yet to achieve? I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I would say so. Here's kind of my journey into VMware. The last two jobs, I think I've mentioned before. I think I applied for jobs like over and over again, like 5, 6, 7 times. I don't even remember how many. Um, but I think the last two were kind of back to back, and one was a tech marketing role with storage and availability, and then this SE role. Right. So I never even got a call back on the tech marketing job. And in the process of interviewing for this SE role, the people who were interviewing me kept on asking me whether this was really what I wanted to do, or was tech marketing what I wanted to do. And I was like, I'd almost forgotten that I had applied for that tech marketing job. It was like maybe 60 or 90 days out, and I just not heard anything back, maybe more than that. And then I realized, oh, they must have seen like this record of me applying for this job. And one of the fears or risks I think they felt that they had was like, oh no, this is somebody who actually wants to be in tech marketing who's just applying to an SE job. And like I had to dissuade them of that. Like that was one of the things I actually had to sell them on. And the reason that I think I was able to do that and be very honest about that was I think that my career progression and what I saw myself doing wasn't necessarily tied to a specific title or a specific role. Part of what I wanted to do and what was maybe attracting me to that tech marketing role was that I was, doing some of that in my previous role, internalizing my knowledge of products and then going out and trying to evangelize it in a one-to-many uh, group setting, right? But that wasn't the entirety of what I saw myself doing in my career. So, helping customers to realize value out of products, helping customers to, organizations to understand the value of the product portfolio that VMware had was definitely a different part of that. And so for me, I was able to kind of deconstruct what I saw from myself and what I wanted. I wanted to be better at this. I wanted to add this to my skill set. I wanted to, mentoring was actually one of the things that I wanted, right? I wanted to be mentored and to mentor other people. And so all of those things, I think I've been able to achieve. I've been able to be more active in social media. I've been able to go to VMugs and help support them. I've been able to podcast. I added that to a list of activities that I've done, and helped in that core SE role. And I've been able to just deconstruct all those things. Now I've gotten promoted in different titles and things like that. But that wasn't. I don't think that was something that was like a strict part of my day one goal, right? It wasn't like in 3 years I want this title, and some people have, are able to do that. That's, for me, I prefer to, again, deconstruct things a little bit, right? So maybe if even if my goal is to have that title, what are the things that one needs to be able to do to have that title? And I'll focus on those things because those are things that I can control. I can be more active this way. I can do this. I can, go above and beyond in these areas. I can't control whether somebody goes, okay, I see that you're doing those things and I'm going to give you that title, right? Like a green check mark. So I can control what I can control and then leave that to somebody else. Now, over time, you feel like, are you being recognized or something like that? That's not a problem that I've ever had. I feel like I've gotten the validation from the people that I've worked with and, my management structure, and I've been happy with that. Right. Um, so that's a pretty long-winded answer, but hopefully that's a way of looking inside how my brain works and how I think about it, and hopefully other people can take what they can from that, and apply it to situations that they're in. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. In fact, John, it a lot of times you have a book recommendation for people. So my book recommendation is Chasing Excellence by Ben Bergeron. I know I mentioned that on the podcast before, but it was kind of like you were reading a chapter out of that book. He talks about how to build the world's fittest athletes, but he does that by focusing on the things that they can control. And in their case, it was how hard they train, the sleep, recovery, nutrition. It wasn't, they actually can't necessarily control whether they win or lose, but they can be as prepared as possible for any situation. And it sounds like you're saying if I focus on the steps I know are needed to get there, the outcome will eventually happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like
I
that.
think we talked about that a little bit when I mentioned process-oriented thinking as opposed to outcome-oriented thinking, and that had to do with like some weird online poker background that I had from like 10 or 15 years ago, and some books that I read in that area. So maybe we'll put a link back to that. But I think it's, two sides of the same coin, right? It's like figure out the process, do the things that you can control, and then there's a certain number of things that are just left to chance, right? What if my goal is, oh, I want, a promotion to this title, and the company that I'm working for has no budget to promote people for that title. So if I did all the things that I felt like I needed to do and progressed and am recognized by all my peers and maybe, people at large in the community at large, but I don't get that promotion to that title, does that mean I've failed? I guess if the only measure for success is promotion to that title, but if I've done everything that I can, under my control, and I've, progressed my career, and other people are asking, well, geez, how can we get somebody like John White into our organization? He seems to be not only promoting his own excellence, but he's affecting all these other people. Maybe he can have this like amazing positive impact in our organization. I mean, then that's success, right? Um, I just don't think that, setting specific outcomes is the is the way to go in terms of goal setting. So I think I set my goals were to do certain things and to control all the things that I could, and I feel like I've been pretty successful. I haven't been perfect, not by a long shot. And there's things that I'm, constantly working on improving, but um, I've been iterating, right? I've been getting better at them, and progress, is always better than, I haven't let like lack of perfection get in the way of progressing. I feel like there's a saying in there somewhere, but I don't know what it
It's
is.
all about the iterations, John, as we well know. I don't know if you're on John White 5.0, 6.0 by now, but sounds like it's going pretty well. And I hope that our listeners will remember that the way you define success can really affect your attitude and a lot of other things, because as you said, it's not just the achieving the outcome or the title. The success is part of the journey and achieving those steps that need to be taken to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like, if people are trying to apply this in their own lives, and they set goals, and the goal, hopefully is to be better. And maybe if it's a career goal, then it's to be recognized and compensated for being better. Um, and and if you leave it general like that, and then start breaking down, all the things that you can do to be better, um, maybe that success doesn't come from the organization that you're in, the recognition, and maybe they just are incapable of doing it. I I worked for a company, 2 jobs ago that had nowhere for me to go. I was already running IT for the entire organization. I was already reporting directly to the general manager. Like literally the only move that I could have made was, I guess, like more money or more pay. But, I had to go to a bigger organization if I was going to maintain, have a career in IT operations. So, sometimes that's just the only move that you can make. And sometimes, this wasn't me, but maybe you're working for an organization, you the listener, not Nick, um, that just doesn't respect you, that doesn't value you, and has like subtly or not so subtly told you that. Well, so then maybe your goal should be to get a better job, to work for a better organization, to be in a better situation for you in your life, and it's a hot job market out there in 2019. February 2nd is when we're recording this. So, um, excellence is always, always in demand. So I think I had a professor who was my advisor in college. He's like, if you're excellent at something, it'll always be in demand, right? You'll always have a job to be really, really good at something. Just try to control that. And, and then, maybe there's a process of self promotion too, right? There's positive and constructive ways to be self promoting, through blogs, through podcasts, through, whatever, social media. So have at it.
I like it. Yeah, and if you do see your shadow like a groundhog may, don't run back in the hole. Keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me shift the focus a little bit, John. Do you have a favorite memory from your time with VMware specifically that you'd like to share with the listeners?
That's a funny question. I think I'm going to fall back on a story that maybe I've told before. And it's about being nerd famous. Not me being nerd famous, but nerd fame, right? So, this was 1 or 2 years ago at VMworld US, and it was two, observations of people at VMware. And the first one was the CEO, Pat Gelsinger, right? So he was on the main stage, giving keynotes, like, guiding people through, 25,000 eyeballs on him, right? Well, that's not when I saw him, right? I mean, of course, I saw him there, but I saw him outside the hands-on labs where I happened to be. I think I was proctoring that year, and he was just walking down the hallway. He had a backpack over one shoulder, suit on, and he's walking down. I didn't see any security with him. I didn't see an executive assistant. He was just hoofing it on his way to a meeting. Nobody stopping him, right? He's just walking. And then a little bit later, I think it was Wade Holmes, who is in tech marketing for the network and security business unit. And I think he had just ended a session. He had walked out. He could not walk 5 feet. He just was mobbed by people, like wanting to ask him, add-on questions about everything. So I was like, this is a weird business we're in, where the CEO can just walk down the hallway without being bothered, but this guy in tech marketing can't. And bothered is probably not the right word to use, but you know. Anyway, that was a funny story. And then I would, I'll throw this, bonus one in. It was the first time that I gave somebody a tour of the VMware campus in Palo Alto. And it's mind blowing, right? It's gorgeous. It's 105 acres in the hills above Palo Alto, and I want to say it's called the Stanford Research Park or something like that. And VMware, I think at the time, got the campus, despite the fact that Facebook and Google wanted it, just because we were, one of the incumbent tenants, and maybe Roche was on it and decided to leave, and Stanford said, well, who wants it? And we said, well, we definitely do. And so it's just amazing to give people the tour, to walk around, to point to the various buildings, and see the grounds and the atmosphere that people do work in at VMware. Pretty amazing.
Very nice. Now you talked about this a few minutes ago, but I want to dig into it a little bit further. 3 years, some people may consider that a long time being with a vendor. Would you say that that's made you less relevant to customers just because you're no longer a customer, more relevant? Or are you so cool that you haven't lost a step? And how do you continue to stay relevant while working for a vendor?
Oh, wow. Yeah. Relevance. Yeah. So I think I'm relevant in a different way than I was relevant when I was a customer, or closer to being a customer. So I think it's all about how I measure my relevance. So if I measure my relevance and my ability to, off the top of my head, come up with like a CLI, like command line flag for a specific use case, or yeah, I know this API backwards and forwards. Let me tell you, and how it works. Like I think I'm not relevant that way in the same way that I used to be. Um, but that's not how I measure my relevance to my customers. Like measure my relevance to my customers by my ability to help them, like overall in the long term, solve their business problems using our technology portfolio. And that way, I've only gotten better. Right? I've only gotten more relevant. So I think my ability to, like, again, be relevant on the command line has gone down, but my overall relevance to my customers has gone up just because of long-term relationship, building trust, my ability to spin up quickly on different parts of our portfolio as the portfolio increases, and answer questions about business value, technology's application in business value. Like that's way more important. Like I'll give you like a random example. Like it's like installing Linux, right? The last time I did like a bare metal installation of Linux operating system into a VM, it was, I don't even remember. I couldn't tell you, right? The last time that I needed like a Linux in a VM, I just grabbed an image that somebody else had done, right? And that's how I do it, right? So um, my ability to coach somebody through bare metal Linux VM installation is at an all-time low, but that's maybe not that important because who does that? It's like a very specific subset of people need that knowledge. And when that information comes up, I know who to call to coach them through that. Right? We have very technical specialists who can help do that. So, you know, my relevance, like I can't be a pure technical expert at all aspects of our technology. It's just impossible. So it's like, who do I know? How quickly can I get answers? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I think about it.
Yeah, that's good. It's not always about solving the problem right then, but knowing what resources you can go to help solve the problem. Yeah, work smarter.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay. Now, do you ever miss the customer side of the fence, John? Would you go back?
Oh yeah, that's interesting too. Um, what I miss is maybe having direct, like 100% input and control over technology um, solution, decisions. Like here's the three ingredients that I'm going to mix together to come up with this solution, and making those decisions. Um, so I don't know at what level you would have to be to really have that. Like that's a very specific thing, right? Coming from a small business, I was able to make those decisions and say, hey, this is what we need to do. And this is what I need budget for. Um, any type of medium-sized business, you're automatically in a decision-making process that you don't have 100% control of. And the person who has 100% control and who can justify budget for things isn't actually working on day-to-day problems, right? So you have like somebody who's a director or a VP who has a specific budget and bit specific sign-off control below certain numbers. If that person is like elbows deep in the technology, like individual technology solution, like that's probably a mistake is being made, right? They're probably too focused on one thing instead of being focused on the portfolio that they control. So, yeah, I think that the things that I miss, I don't think that I'd be able to do, right? Like that doesn't really exist. And the things that I like, I've been able to find ways to like scratch that itch. I can be an influencer at a bunch of different levels at a bunch of different organizations. So, I really like that. I like the process of gaining trust, of building up that reputation within the organization, and then coming back in a very focused manner when there's a very specific problem and saying, okay, here's how we're going to solve it. And here's what we need to do to help you get that done inside your organization to help mold a vision too, right? That's maybe a different way is like, hey, we're thinking about getting into this. Like, what? We don't know anything about it. What do we need to do? Do we talk to Gartner or some other, um, you know, group out there and say, who are the leading people in the market? Like, what? How do we create a vision? And to help them create a vision for their technological future, I mean, that's super powerful. And you can do that in, like I said, a bunch of different organizations. And there really is no job that I think that I could go into where I'm really going to have that 100% control, right? The CIO at a large company doesn't have 100% control over individual technology decisions. Like they shouldn't anyway, right? They should be watching over portfolio, watching over teams and personalities and, multiple VPs that report to them who have multiple directors reporting to them that have multiple managers who have multiple individual contributors. Like that's 4 or 5
Sure.
layers away, right? So
Well, yeah, and it depends on how micromanagerial the CIO is, as well as sometimes you'll find in the smaller shops, at least in my experience, that a CIO, CTO could be super technical and in charge of making exactly those decisions. I think in your larger organizations, you're spot on there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So we talked about some of the things that are perks of working for a vendor, some things you like. Is there anything you would identify as maybe the least glamorous part of working for a technology vendor, John?
So I would say, um, as a solution engineer, we're part of the sales organization. So always, sitting in on sales meetings is like the least glamorous part. It's also a really important part, but it's not a glamorous part. It's, the nuts and bolts of sales process and sales process management and inspection of what's going on. So I would say like that is not glamorous. It's not necessarily 100% enjoyable, but it is, not not every part of dinner is dessert.
Well, you eat dessert
So
first, right? So you have room for it?
right.
Now, we said in a different episode, we'll have to dig that one up, that some knowledge of the sales process is important to people in any role. Would you still agree with that?
Yeah, I would say at least in this solution engineering role, pre-sales technical engineering, knowing what the sales process looks like is super important. And most companies use some variation on a process that IBM came up with in the 70s and 80s. And I actually had a colleague at a previous position who kind of clued me into that. And he kind of told me, an apocryphal story that everybody at IBM in that organization, like down to the executive assistants and the secretaries, needed to know the entire sales process and what different sales stages meant and the significance of them. So when a vice president's like executive assistant took a phone call and said, "Hey, I need the VP on the line for this deal. It's in stage 6, and it's pretty important. It's at this scale." Like that person knew exactly what a stage 6 deal meant, right? So that's I think we'll post a link. I'll look around for what that IBM sales process model is. I'm sure, like I said, that almost every company out there uses some variation of it. I think even Salesforce and their default setup uses this variation of that. So um, is it super important to know, like, before you join an organization, maybe the general outline of what those different stages look like and what they might mean? But every company uses like a different version of that. And, how do you get from stage one to stage two? How do you get from stage two to stage three? Um, the nuts and bolts of that are unique to every single organization. So, you just need to know their variation on it. But if you know the overall process, like, you know, learning their specifics is I think a little bit easier. I don't, does that match your experience of coming in? Because I think you came in maybe without exposure to that like sales process stage. So learning that maybe was a little bit different for you.
Yeah, that was definitely different from me. I hadn't been exposed to that before. At what point do we change the opportunity to the next stage, and what do we look for, and how does it work from talking about it at the beginning? Yes, we're interested, to yes, we're going to buy this technology. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't really know anything about it, even in the role that I had where I was doing some pre-sales consultations. That wasn't really part of the knowledge I needed to have. It was mostly just the technical side and not that much on the sales process side. So yeah, it's been really good to help understand that. And honestly, sometimes the customer has to understand how long it takes to get from idea to purchase to implementation so that they can meet their own deadlines.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably only important to companies that are managing complex sales cycles of complex products and at a large scale where they need introspection into that sales process from a high level. So if you go to Best Buy, um, probably there's not like a complex sales process to sell somebody an Xbox, right? So it's like somebody came in and they bought it. The end, right? So they manage sales in a slightly different way at that level, than somebody like VMware or again back in the day at IBM where they had complex products that needed configuration, that needed validation. Is this actually the right product for this customer? Is it going to meet their needs? Are they going to be happy with it? Are they going to realize value from it at the price that we can sell it to them where it makes sense, right? But these are questions that the solution engineer is helping to answer, right? Oh yeah, you do have that problem. This can help you solve it, but we sell it for at a price where the value that it's going to bring to you is not going to pay off for 7 years. So that's not a economical solution for you, right? It's not that rare. It's not that common for us to actually have that issue, right? Our solutions pay off pretty quickly, but you have to recognize that, and you have to help them the customers understand like where that value is coming from, whether it's dollars or time or capabilities, lowering of risk, increasing quality service. Like these, value comes from a lot of different places. So helping them understand that value is sometimes it's not immediately obvious, right? You're not going to spend $40,000 on this thing and then save $40,000 in direct budget savings in 6 months. Maybe that's not going to happen, but maybe you're going to get things back in a different way.
Right. The ROI may take some time. There's another uh, buzz term for you. But as part of that sales process, you and others who are in field facing roles are going to have to go and visit the customer. And oftentimes you're traveling by car, sometimes by plane, sometimes by both. So I'm curious about how the amount of travel has been for you since you started. Has that changed at all? And do you have any tips for people who have a role that requires them to do some traveling?
Sure, sure, yeah. I think that ultimately, um, that's going to be dependent on the role and even all the people that have the same title in the same region that I live travel different amounts because they have different customers, right? So if they have a customer who has, five customers and they all have maybe a headquarters in the Bay Area, but they have, technical headquarters in St. Louis, and a different like business unit headquarters in Seattle, and a different business unit headquarters in Atlanta. Well, they're going to be doing a lot more traveling than me if I don't have those things. So I don't have that many customers that are that dispersed. So I've been flying, maybe once a quarter. But everything else is like, 3 days out of 5, I'm probably driving somewhere. So there's a couple different things that, I have as keys to success in traveling. And the first is packing lists. Like this is, for me, it's critical. Like, the getting somewhere and realizing that you've forgotten something important is a big bummer, right? So, um, having a packing list for everything, even for like a customer visit that's, locally for 15-minute drive away, I still have a list for that. Um, packing out to go visit, fly somewhere for a week, I have a different packing list for that. So, I think packing lists are just critically important. Local packing lists, I still take like a battery, to charge my phone, to charge my laptop. Those, maybe a plug for the laptop, but those kinds of things. Uh, Man, business cards. It's like if you have a list and you can just look at the list and say, yeah, I have all of these things, and then walk out the door feeling very certain of that. Like you never have any stress that you forgot something. Same thing to go on a flight. Yes, I have my passport. Yes, I have, my hotel reservations, on my phone. Yes, I know everywhere that I'm going. Yes, I have my, my car reservation, et cetera, et cetera. So, um, yeah, all of those things, like, critically important. It just de-stresses everything. If you're flying a lot, I would recommend, um, I don't know, before I move on to flying, does that make sense, the packing list?
It absolutely does. And one thing I thought of, John, is I would love to see the differences in those packing lists depending on where you're going. And I'm sure that the listeners would too. So I smell a blog in the works for you. I think that would be a cool one to share with the community. I'm just gonna toss that out there as an idea.
That's awesome. Like I remember definitely telling you that you should blog about something and maybe feel like I was assigning homework, and now I'm on the other end of that. It's exactly what it feels like.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and you want John to blog about it, just send that tweet out to @nerdjourney and we'll see what the demand is because I feel like a lot of people could get some value out of this, John. Now we're going to peer pressure you to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, yeah.
All your students are counting on you.
Absolutely. all my all my peers. I'll call you all my peers. Um yeah, flying, I would say, or traveling out of town in general, it's like a little bit different. Um some very specific, like targeted things, like I would, if you're flying with any regularity, I would say, more than twice a year, I would sign up for the Customs and Border Patrol program called Global Entry. I think it's like $85 every 5 years or something like that. It's a superset of the TSA PreCheck program. So with Global Entry, you do get PreCheck as a side effect. The main program is focused on bypassing customs checkpoints. So you get a background check and you get enrolled in TSA PreCheck as well. So, all the benefits of TSA PreCheck because you get that, but also if you have ever travel internationally, you can bypass Customs and Border Patrol just by filling out a yes, no, I'm not bringing anything in over the limits, and here's all my declarations if I have anything to declare that are below the limits, and drop it in a box and just go. Right. So I think I was traveling back from Toronto last year, and it saved me probably 90 minutes at the airport by bypassing customs lines. So if you can do that, 2 or 3 times in 5 years, like it'll pay for itself just in hassle at the border. Plus all the benefits of the TSA PreCheck lines, which is that's the Transportation Safety Authority. Is that what TSA stands for? But they have people who have known traveler numbers or pass ID numbers, who have already had their backgrounds checked. You don't have to take your shoes off. You don't have to take your laptop out of your backpack or bag. And so it makes going through security at airports just a lot more comfortable. Um, Frequent traveler programs, I think that's another thing to investigate. I would say, you know, pick an airline and kind of focus on it. Sometimes you'll pay $30 or $40 more to travel, but the benefits of being a frequent traveler can pay off. Um, Mostly, I would say at that kind of like 50,000 mile a year or more level, if you can get 50,000 miles on a single airline and not like through their credit card. I mean, 50,000 like qualifying traveled miles, right? So different airlines have different programs, but I fly United in general. Generally, that means like the minimum number of miles I'm going to earn on any trip is going to be 500. If you take United for a 100-mile hop, they still give you 500 miles, and then anything above 500, it's the actual miles flown. Um, if you're like I said, if you're flying 50,000 miles or more, like you can check in earlier, get an assigned seat earlier. Even at the 25,000 mile level, you can, um, at least in United, you can get the Economy Plus seats for no extra charge as long as they're available. It's a little bit extra leg room. Opt in and get those like exit row seats. Again, no extra charge. So, you just have to understand whether like that's of value to you, your comfort is a value to you. So for different people, you might have different goals. So, airlines like Southwest, they don't have any differentiation with the class of service. It's just like maybe earlier boarding. So that might be of value to you. And then I think again, airlines like Southwest can be like, oh, if you're a frequent flyer, then you can get free companion tickets. So if you want to take companion on flights, and that's super important to you, more important than maybe upgrades to economy plus or business class or first class or free access to like lounges, frequent flyer lounges, then I would go that way. um yeah, so that's just an individual thing. I think I mentioned before I use the dongle from automatic.com to track my local driving, and then I capture all my expense receipts in camera. If you have a system for filing that away, so you don't have to carry around those pieces of paper. Like I found, like that's way better than trying to keep pieces of paper around. Maybe it's easy for other people. I always lose them, and it's a real pain to have to file for expenses that need receipts when you don't have a receipt. So,
And hopefully when you say you lose receipts, you mean that you recycled them, right, John? I mean, please tell me that's what you mean.
well, I think I just mean that like I've thrown them away if I'm trying to carry around the piece of paper. Um, the chance that I've thrown it away or lost it, oh, I left it in the car that I rented, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. I got you.
Yeah, or at the hotel room that I've just left.
What's the farthest you've ever had to travel for a customer meeting?
I think San Francisco to Atlanta. I don't think I've been to the East Coast. Um, yeah, I think I've been to, like in my previous gigs, I've been to Orlando and Baltimore, um, out of Southern California. That was probably the longest flight I've had to take. But yeah, I don't think I ever crested that like 50,000 mile mark. So I'm not sure that I got a ton of value. The value that I got was getting those economy plus seats. Um, if there were any available 24 hours ahead of the flight, I could just grab them and say, that's my seat now, and no additional charge. So always a good thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Let me steer the conversation yet another direction here. I've heard you say that this is your dream job. So, with that being said, how does John White determine what the next role should be and what might make a logical next step from here? So, I have some theories, and if you don't mind, I'd like to share them with you before you answer. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure.
So, my thoughts were maybe you go for Principal SE. That's the highest title you can get at VMware, or maybe an SE at another company. Maybe you go into management of some sort, like SE manager. Maybe you become a technical trainer. Maybe technical marketing. Maybe you go back to the customer side, although after what you said earlier, that's probably not likely. Maybe you become a career coach slash owner of the John White School of Mentoring full time because that's your area of destiny. That's just me thinking out loud. Maybe you become an IT recruiter. I think it could be any one of those. I'm curious to know what you think.
Oh man, that's a lot of good choices there. Um, so some context, I think, for new listeners, I think I said in the past, the first day at VMware as an SE, I realized, oh, my dream has been to be an SE at VMware for the last 5 years. So now I need to figure out a new dream, right? Um, so I think there's probably a lot of overlap with what I said about, the 3 year plan, the 3 year goal. I think my next goal, I can't and necessarily, you know, maybe I shouldn't define it by a specific title and a specific role. I think what I need to do is deconstruct the things that I enjoy doing and work on being better at those, and then maybe some roles will present themselves as more or less valid by doing those things. So the things that I've been really enjoying doing have been mentoring other SEs, kind of figuring out the best practices, the common things that work really well across barriers of what segment that we're in, what specialty or core that we're doing. So that practice of being an SE, getting better at that, and then helping other people to be better at that. Really enjoying that. I think, again, collaboration with my peers has been just awesome and terrific, and I'd like to continue doing that. Um, you know, I think, a little bit more one to many types of engagements would be nice. Maybe where I'm not just talking to my customers, but to a larger group of customers. Um, so that, there's a bunch of different ways to get involved in that. Maybe that's, speaking at VMUGs, maybe it's, figuring out a way to do a VMware presentation, or some other technical conference, right? So I think I'm kind of thinking again in that same way, that deconstruction and then figuring out what roles naturally emerge from that. The principal SE role, I think that I don't know that if we've like specifically explained that um, at VMware, and I think this is kind of descended from EMC. When EMC purchased VMware, they had a principal program, and the technical career path for SEs, you know, includes like either going into management or being like a better and better version of an SE. And the theory, in any rate, is that you kind of have like a similar pay scale to being in management if you are impacting a similar number of customers as a manager, right? And then the same, if your impact radius is such that you are impacting the same number of people as customers as a director, then maybe you should be on that same, similar pay scale as a director and have a title like that. So that's what the principal program is. And so I think um, we have right now, like you can come in as a regular SE, then you can be a senior SE, then there's a staff SE, which is the title I have now, and then senior staff, and then principal. And that senior staff and principal, like there's a review board, like you need to get a bunch of endorsements, from people outside of the SE organization. So that might be something to shoot for. But again, that I have to say that I can't judge my success and failure within the organization by whether I get that title. I have to, figure out the things that I enjoy, spend my time on those. And then if I'm recognized for it, then that would be a nice side effect, right? So, technical marketing, yeah, maybe that's another career path, standing up in front of large groups of people, but, it also involves a lot of like behind the scenes stuff, like, really learning deep technical knowledge of a specific product, writing white papers, running your own internal labs, and having, uh, just a relationship with product management. There's a bunch of things that doesn't involve, giving presentations to, 400 people in a room. So, yeah, I don't know, not sure, but I think the things that you've talked about, like, I could probably do in a bunch of different roles, right? Whether that's managing a group of SEs, that, then there's a lot of mentoring there, right? Principal, there's probably still a lot of mentoring there. Technical marketing, yeah, probably a lot of, one to many, and then, deep technical knowledge. So it's really being open to all those things, and figuring out what I have time to work on, and then seeing what presents itself. So that's a really long-winded way of saying I'm not sure, but there it is.
Now, do you feel pretty good about the technical generalist role that you're in now? Would you ever consider really specializing? I know the technical marketing job would make you really dig in and specialize probably in a particular product area, but we also have specialist SE roles as well. Is that something you've ever thought about?
Yeah, I think I've kept my mind open to doing that. Um, I would say right now it's a little bit difficult to get spun up on all the technologies that we need to know at the levels that we need to know as a core SE, and also start to spin up on knowledge of a specific business unit, and um, and get to that level to, like, maybe make the jump to specialist. Um, yeah, and I don't know that. I think there's a bunch of things that need to go into that, right? Which is knowing the territory, knowing the customers, knowing the demand for that specialist role, and then, you know, uh, if that was a specific goal of mine, probably I'd need to be open to the idea of, like, becoming a specialist and in a specific business unit, and then being open to moving to where that next role is actually available, right? Because I can't go, well, I know the two people who are doing the job in the Bay Area, for whatever business unit it is. So either I'm waiting for them to hire a third and applying for that, or I'm waiting for one of those other people to get promoted up, or leave the organization. You could be waiting forever. So, or, maybe going to work for one of the smaller business units that's spinning up, and needs people to cover, entire sections of the company, right? Um, yeah. So, I mean, all those things are possibilities. I don't think that I've mentally committed to any of those things. I think I've just kind of left it open, and, looked around to, do I have, like, a strong singular passion for any individual technology that we have? I've been more and less excited about different products that we have. Um, I've been pretty excited about everything that we have, as far as, like, customers are concerned and solving their problems. But, like, for me personally to invest, go, okay, the next 7 years of my career, I want to be involved in this specific technology. I don't know that I've necessarily found that yet.
Oh, I see. So I think what I heard you say is you're waiting for blockchain to really take off. I get it. Totally understand.
Yeah, blockchain, VMware blockchain SE.
Hmm.
That's kind of the dream job.
Yeah, later next year,
Hence,
you
hence
watch, folks.
sarcasm.
He'll be doing it. I, so here's a fun one for you, John. I know you're also the co-host of the VMware Roundtable Community Podcast. When did you start doing that, and how did that happen? I mean, how did you get to be nerd famous enough to be the co-host of that podcast?
Oh man, yeah, that's an interesting story too. I think it's been almost 2 years now. I should probably know the specific date that I started doing that, but I don't. I think this is all about, again, being open to things, right? So different people have different styles of doing that. One of the things I noticed was that VMware hosted a bunch of different meetups. So things like blockchain meetups and container meetups and open stack meetups. So I would go to a bunch of those, and at one of those, I think it was the OpenStack meetup actually on the VMware campus, you learn a bunch of things about, those specific technologies, and um, you meet a bunch of interesting people at different other organizations and who are involved in that technology. And that's just, again, part of my job is to just be personable and talk to people. So I just kept on striking up conversations with different people, finding out what they were doing. And then I was talking to this guy for about 20 minutes. And then we finally both realized that we both worked for VMware. So that wasn't, necessarily a great use of time to get to know each other, like as far as like, talking to people and then maybe introducing them to what VMware is doing in OpenStack. But it happened to be Eric Nielsen, right? So he said that he ran a podcast, and I was like, oh wow! For whatever reason, I didn't know that we had any podcasts. I just assumed that they're all out of Austin. He's like, nope, nope. Our social media marketing team is here in Palo Alto. So, he was looking for somebody who in a field technical role to be a co-host to come in and talk about, that perspective. And I was happy to do it. And I think the night before I was doing it, I went and listened to, he gave me a pointer or something to the archives, and I was like, oh, this is the VMware Community Roundtable podcast. Like, I've been listening to that for 5 years. I just didn't realize that's the podcast you're talking about, So, and then I went in and I was like, oh yeah, Eric Nielsen. Yeah, that's the voice that I hear like every week. I feel really, really silly not knowing who you were, or what I was signing up for. So I just kind of like accidentally, happened upon it. But, that being said, it's funny that like the harder you work and you go to extracurricular things, like, the luckier you get. Right. So, I can't say that I would 100% have like run into him, if I kept on going to those things, but I definitely would not have if I never went. So, um, you always go to things and you always network, and good things happen, right?
Yeah, you never know what opportunities may present themselves, and then you have to decide whether or not to pursue it. That's good. I like that. And then
Yeah.
you recruited somebody to join VMware to become your podcast co-host for this podcast, right?
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I think, I definitely had an idea of doing a podcast like way before joining the communities roundtable. Like, that was like kind of a long-term thing. I want to say in the first week that I was at VMware, or even before I joined, I was like, I'd like to podcast about this experience, at some point. I didn't have the thesis of an idea until you came on, and I was like, oh, we should talk about, your journey being an SE at VMware and what that adjustment is like, right? What that experience is like. And then that kind of morphed into this career in general, like advice podcast. Like, hopefully we can, model our experiences, and by that, like, actually, show people how we were successful and have one model for success.
Yeah. It's been fun so far. Hopefully we've said some smart things that have helped people. I
Yeah, hopefully we've been helpful,
feel
right?
like I feel like we have helped some people. So, how
Yeah,
about this, John? Do you mind sharing a lesson that you had to learn the hard way during your time at VMware?
sure. Oh yeah. So like, this is an easy answer, right? Not everybody is reasonable. I had to learn that the hard way. Not everybody, and maybe a better way to put it is like, not everybody sees our company as an important partner in their portfolio of solutions that they're using. So like, I see us as playing like a major role no matter what it is you're doing. Not everybody is that way. And then on top of that, not everybody is reasonable. So I've had some adversarial interactions, or just confrontational, or, like, not polite, any of those like things, and it's just sometimes somebody's having a bad day and you overcome it over time. And sometimes that's just somebody's attitude towards everything, or towards VMware and everybody working at VMware. It all of those things happen. And so you just have to understand that and not take it personally. And that was a very, very difficult lesson, right? To go like, oh, like, that's, I don't know what's going on there, but it can't affect me and my like life, right? It can affect my like interaction with that person. Like I can know, oh, okay, I need to be a little bit on guard. I need to understand like where they're coming from and their viewpoint of VMware as a solution partner. But like none of that is about me personally.
Right. You can
So
only control
it's a,
your reactions to situations.
absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't bleed over, but you just have to understand, like that's just your like stress hormones and chemicals in your body that are reacting to interactions that you're having, and it carries over, and then those go away if you drink enough water.
There you go. Speaking of stress, John, how about work-life balance? Has that been easy to come by? Are you out of balance, in balance? Do you fluctuate? I know that in previous episodes, I talked about how I was kind of out of balance at the beginning, and I still have periods where it goes off balance. What do you think?
Yeah, the amount of time that we have to spend working waxes and wanes, right? So there's sprints and then there's slow periods. And you have to be productive in your slow periods and you have to manage the amount of time that you're investing in those sprints. Um, so, like, in some ways, it's been like incredibly freeing. We work from home. Um, and I would say, like, the most difficult thing that I've had to do is manage how much I'm working and not like starting early enough or or working through the entire day. My problem has just been working too much. Right? There's always training to do. There's always things that I could be working on. There's always notes and thoughts that I have about customers that, and next steps and additional transcription of my handwritten meeting notes that I could be doing. Like there's an infinite amount of work that I could be doing. And my problem, it's been, less of a problem recently, but my problem has been like, oh, all of a sudden it's 7:30 and I haven't stopped working, and my wife's already eaten dinner. It's 9:30. It's 10:30. It's 11:30. My wife is asleep. It's 3:30. I should have gone to sleep 5 hours ago. And so that's something to really manage and watch out for. And I've just gotten better at that. Right. I set alarms for myself. 11 o'clock alarm. Why are you still awake? That kind of thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that tracks with you. I
I,
think that's what I described to you as going into the role.
yeah, I definitely have periods where I have difficulty turning it off because, when you're out visiting with customers and you come back, there's still email to answer. There are still other customers that want your attention and you want to try and be responsive to them so that they don't think that you're ignoring their request. So you have to
Yep.
find that balance. Sometimes you have to choose to go to sleep and take care of yourself. Maybe you send a quick email that says, "I'm going to get back to you tomorrow, but
Yep.
I can't do it right now." At least to let them know that their message didn't go into a black hole. So
Right. Right.
I think I go in spurts and sprints. The exercise is definitely helping from what I've been doing since the beginning of the year, and my resolution is still pretty much on track there.
Nice.
It's definitely forcing me to sleep more because I'm pretty worn out. Haven't worked out this hard for this long ever, and I want to keep going. So I definitely
Nice.
get it, man. What about okay, last one, John. I know we've gone a little long this time, but I think it's been good discussion and definitely applicable to anybody in any job.
Hmm.
Last one. What would make you leave the company tomorrow?
Ooh.
Is there anything?
Hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Um. Right. So probably comes in a few categories. One would be if I had an ethical mismatch with what the company was doing. So I felt like there's like a huge ethical, gap, and I just couldn't live with that. Right. So, um, yeah. So I think that would be one. Right. I would say the second would be cultural. Like if there's a big cultural gap between what I expected and wanted out of the company and what was actually happening, like I don't know, like if there's like a major like bro culture or um, like discriminatory culture that I noticed like happening, and there's I voiced my concern and they said, hey, that's not important. Well, that's probably not something I can really associate myself with, like, long term, medium term, probably even short term. Um, so maybe like another cultural issue might be like, recognition and feeling valued. Like that's pretty important. So if I felt like I was being not valued, like, and, you know, uh, I don't know, maybe compensation would be one, gross way of measuring that, but, just attaboys and, recognition as, a good team member, right? And support of the team like that would be maybe another gap. Family issues, of course. Like, there's always, family things that can happen that can make you just drop everything and say, hey, I got to take care of this. I can't stay. And it's going to be long term. It's a long term problem. I suppose there could be non-problem things with the family too, right? Like, hey, we won the lottery. We're now worth $100 million. It's tough to work like 60 hours a week, when you're worth $100 million or whatever, right? So I don't play the lottery, so that's probably not going to be an issue. But I just wanted to point out sometimes there's like positive family issues there too. Career issues. Maybe I already said that. Just I felt like undervalued or at a dead end. No way out. You know, I, these are all like things that we've talked about for other people. So I think that the career dead end, that's not a tomorrow thing, right? That builds up over time. So maybe we rule that out. But it would be something that I would watch out for if I go, oh, I don't have a career path forward. Like I can't imagine doing exactly what it is I'm doing for 2 more years, or maybe they're not even going to have this role in 3 years. If I ever felt like one of those things, then that would make me reassess what was going on. Like, fortunately for me, none of those things that I mentioned is actually an issue at VMware on my team with my manager and my director. So I'm very happy to say that.
That's fantastic. Good advice for anyone looking to evaluate good reasons to leave the company. And of course, we talked about reasons to turn down an offer, so not super different from that. I like
Yeah.
it. Thanks, John, for letting me pick your brain here. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's the only segment that we had, really, right? um, but anything else pop in your mind before we break?
I don't think so. I just want everyone to know that this has been Inside the Mind of John White, Part 2. And if you're out there and you want to know more about John and you want to get more nuggets of wisdom from that great mind, just send that tweet out to @NerdJourney to sign up for the John White School of Mentoring, pricing and packaging to come. We, of course, want you to subscribe and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. We want to know if we're being helpful and are always looking for interesting questions to ponder. We're collectively on Twitter @NerdJourney.
All right. Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White @WeJourneyman, for Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.
Joined by my co-host, Nick Cordy @NetworkNerd_. Hey, Nick, how's it going?
It's going great. Okay, you win. You win. I need a minute.
That wasn't on purpose, man. That was just me.
I'm cool.